They say the ground remembers every whisper. Some are murmurs of rain, some the scurrying of roots, and some, if you press your ear close enough, are voices that should not be speaking at all. In the old market town of Grevenloch, there is one such whisper, a man's voice, rising from the soil, telling of a night when the earth swallowed him whole, yet failed to claim him. The story begins not in a graveyard, but in the shadowed courtyard of a centuries-old inn, where the walls lean in as though eavesdropping on every secret. Locals recall that winter as one of frostbite and failing harvests. The town had turned inward, doors locked, shutters barred, yet gossip travels faster than any wind. A stranger had arrived, cloaked in dust, his face unreadable, his name rarely spoken aloud. They called him the Sleeper, not for idleness, but for what he claimed to have endured. He spoke little, but his eyes lingered on things others ignored, the patterns in stone, the way candlelight bent around objects, the cold breath of wind from places where no window stood. And then came the wager. No one remembers who suggested it, perhaps a drunkard, perhaps the man himself, but it was agreed he would spend 3 nights beneath the soil, with a single bell above ground to mark if he stirred. In this town of superstition, it felt more like a rite than a test. They say the burial took place under a moon the color of tarnished silver. The earth was cool and damp, smelling of roots and forgotten rain. As they lowered him into the narrow pit, he neither flinched nor spoke. Only when the first shovelful of soil fell did he close his eyes, not in fear, but in something like recognition. For 3 days, the bell was silent. On the first night, a stray dog pawed at the mound, whimpering. On the second, frost gripped the rope, sealing it stiff. On the third, the townsfolk gathered, half expecting wonder, half fearing sorrow. When the final spade struck the coffin lid, they heard it, not the bell, but a steady breath. They lifted him into the light, pale and cool, his eyes opening as if waking from a dream. "You buried me," he whispered, "but you did not hear what the earth tried to tell you. What do you think? Has any story ever sent chills down your spine? Share your thoughts." And now it's story time. Once upon a time, in a realm where magic whispered through ancient trees and starlight danced on silver streams, there lived a princess named Alara. Unlike her peers, Alara found solace not in silk and jewels, but in the rustling leaves and babbling brooks of the whispering woods. The forest was her sanctuary, its secrets her delight. Yet a shadow loomed over this idyllic existence. The whispering woods was dying. The trees, once vibrant and full of mirth, were withering, their whispers fading into ominous silences. The animals fled, and even the sunlight seemed reluctant to penetrate the thickening gloom. Alarmed by the forest's demise and sensing an encroaching darkness, Princess Alara embarked on a quest to uncover the cause of these chilling changes. Her journey led her deep into the woods, each step accompanied by the rustle of dead leaves underfoot and the haunting hoot of an owl. The deeper she ventured, the more oppressive the silence became, broken only by the pounding of her own heart. Suddenly, a clearing emerged from the gloom, and in its center stood a magnificent oak. Its branches gnarled and bare against the leaden sky, and under its withered shade sat an old woman stirring a bubbling cauldron. The woman's face was etched with wrinkles, her eyes twinkling with an eerie light. As Alara approached, the woman stirred, fixing her gaze upon the princess. "Who are you?" Alara demanded, her voice echoing in the stillness. "I am the guardian of this wood," the woman rasped, her voice like the crackling of a dying fire. "And you, child, are the last of the Sun Elves, a race known for their affinity with nature and light." Alara nodded, understanding dawning on her. She was the last of her kind, and the fate of the Whispering Woods, along with the balance of light and dark in the realm, rested upon her shoulders. "How can I help?" she whispered, her voice filled with determination. The old woman gestured with a gnarled finger towards the cauldron. "The source of this wood's sorrow is within that brew," she said, her voice heavy with ages past. "But to retrieve it, you must first face the shadows within." Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that chilling tale. If you did, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more spin-tingling stories, subscribe for more content. Until next time, may your nights be bright and your dreams be fearless. This is a reread of a horror short story called The Sleeper by Stephen Graham Jones, originally published in the magazine Asimov's Science Fiction in 1994. It was later included in Jones' collection Exiles and Other Weird Tales. The story is set in the fictional town of Grevenloch, which sits at the base of a mountain in the valley of the same name. The morning after, Grevenloch stood between relief and unease. He walked the square with slow, deliberate steps. Merchants halted their haggling to watch. Lantern sellers turned their wares away. Even stray dogs kept their distance. It was not simply that he had returned, it was how his voice had a curious resonance, as if echoing from a deep chamber. When asked about his first night, he answered, "How did you sleep?" And when pressed, "Did you have to relieve yourself?" But his bladder was not the only thing he was trying to empty. At dusk, a hush fell over the crowd. All eyes were on the man who stepped out of the mist, who now stood silhouetted against the dying light. His arms were outstretched and his face was tilted up as if in supplication. Then, as if pushed by an invisible hand, he began to move. First a step forward, then another. and then he was running, stumbling, tripping over the uneven cobblestones, but still running. He reached the center of the square and fell to his knees. "Still," he cried out, "I have something to give back," but nothing came of it. And so he rose unsteadily and shuffled home. By the second evening, the whispers had grown sharper. Some swore no food or water had touched him, yet he walked without faltering. Others claimed frost had spread from the mound in delicate, unreadable patterns. Old Mason Jacobi, who had come to watch the spectacle with a crowd of children, spoke of the ground's history. "Centuries ago," he said, "those awaiting judgment stood here through the night. The soil was hungry for the living and slow to release them. Perhaps it had tried to keep him, or given him something instead." When pressed, the sleeper told of the first night, the cold pressing in, the darkness like velvet, and shapes carved from the earth brushing against him. They spoke without words, offering a choice. He never said what it was, only that he accepted. As the mist rolled through the streets, the crowd grew restless. People edged away from the square, seeking shelter in doorways or under market stalls. Some hurried home, pulling shutters and bolting doors against the rising wind. Then, just before dawn, one merchant swore he heard the faint toll of a bell, though the rope had been burned days before. Though the story doesn't say it, you can probably imagine the rest. Whatever the sleeper has returned from, whatever deal he has made, it's clear that he's not the same and the town is in peril. And that's the end of part 1. Part 2 will be out next week. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support the channel, consider becoming a patron. Your support helps to keep this channel running and allows us to bring you new episodes every week. You can find the link to that in the description. If not, that's okay too. Just remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time. The first 2 days passed without incident. Then on the third day, strangers started showing up. They came from farms and villages far away, some claiming they'd dreamt of his return. The innkeeper said his room felt like a cellar lined with mirrors. Candles leaned toward some unseen current. Water jugs froze overnight and herbs turned brittle at his touch. Yet his hands were warm and his eyes burned with a restless light. One night Jacob brought a wrapped fragment of stone carved with shifting spirals. He had pried it from the burial site, swearing it was older than the town. The sleeper held it, then murmured, "A pact in the deep is never truly yours." The next morning, frost spirals appeared around town. They were in doorways and cupboards and mirrors. People began calling him the Returned, but none asked aloud. If the earth had given him something, what had it taken in return? I know this story feels like it's missing something, and you're right, it needs atmosphere. So let me take you back to the beginning. The village was a cluster of tired roofs huddled around a church like gossiping hens. A biting wind cut down the hill, rattling the shutters of the inn like a skeleton in a loose box. The year before, the villagers had buried their dead and the earth had claimed him as her own. But this winter, the earth was restless. On the first day he arrived, the wind snatching his hood. In his wake, frost and footprints, but no breath of cold air. He smelled of wood smoke and distant rain. He sat alone in the common room, his cloak a dark island in a sea of anxious faces. When he finally spoke, his voice was like grinding stones. "I have come back," he said, "because the earth has sent for me." On the second day, the whispers grew louder, weaving tales of the ice that whiles away the years, of how the earth had claimed him as her own, and how he had returned on her command. Fear turned the villagers' faces ashen. Their questions hung in the air, unspoken. Why had the earth claimed him, and why had she brought him back? The story is picking up steam, but it still lacks that certain genie says qua. What if we introduce an element of the fantastical, a touch of magic? Let's try that now. The village was a cluster of tired roofs huddled around a church like gossiping hens. A biting wind cut down the hill, rattling the shutters of the inn like a skeleton in a loose box. The year before, the villagers had buried their dead, their beloved Jacob, and the earth had claimed him as her own. But this winter, the earth was restless. On the first day he arrived, the wind snatching his hood. In his wake, frost and footprints, but no breath of cold air. He smelled of wood smoke and distant rain and something else, something indefinable, yet undeniably magical. When he pushed open the door, he walked alone in a shaft of pale sunlight. The villagers gasped. The air shimmered. Was that a trick of the light, or was their beloved Jacob glowing with an unearthly radiance? His eyes, they shone with a strange and captivating light. On the second day, the whispers grew louder, weaving tales of the ice that whiles away the years, of how the earth had claimed him as her own, and how he had returned on her command. Fear turned the villagers' faces ashen. Their questions hung in the air, unspoken. Why had the earth claimed him, and why had she brought him back so much better? Now let's add some sensory details. The village was a cluster of tired roofs huddled around a gnarled old church like gossiping hens. A biting wind clawed down the hill, rattling the shutters of the inn like a skeleton in a loose box. The year before, the villagers had buried their dead, their beloved Jacob, and the earth had claimed him as her own. But this winter, the earth was restless. On the first day he arrived, the wind snatching his hood. In his wake, frost and footprints, but no breath of cold air. He smelled of wood smoke and distant rain and something else, something indefinable, yet undeniably magical. When he pushed open the door, he walked alone in a shaft of pale sunlight. The villagers gasped, the air shimmered. Was that a trick of the light, or was their beloved Jacob glowing with an unearthly radiance? His eyes shone with a strange and captivating light. On the second day, the whispers grew louder, weaving tales of the ice that whiles away the years, of how the earth had claimed him as her own, and how he had returned on her command. Fear turned the villagers' faces ashen. Their questions hung in the air, unspoken. Why had the earth claimed him, and why had she brought him back? That's much improved, but it still needs conflict. The village was a cluster of tired roofs huddled around a gnarled old church like gossiping hens. A biting wind clawed down the hill, rattling the shutters of the inn like a skeleton in a loose box. The year before, the villagers had buried their dead, their beloved Jacob, and the earth had claimed him as her own. But this winter, the earth was restless. On the first day he arrived, the wind snatching his hood. In his wake, frost and footprints, but no breath of cold air. He smelled of wood smoke and distant rain, and something else, something indefinable, yet undeniably magical. When he pushed open the door, he walked alone in a shaft of pale sunlight. The villagers gasped, the air shimmered. Was that a trick of the light, or was their beloved Jacob glowing with an unearthly radiance? His eyes shone with a strange and captivating light. On the second day, the whispers grew louder, weaving tales of the ice that whiles away the years, of how the earth had claimed him as her own, and how he had returned on her command. Fear turned the villagers' faces ashen. Their questions hung in the air, unspoken. Why had the earth claimed him, and why had she brought him back? On the third day, strangers came from far away, some claiming they'd dreamt of his return. The innkeeper said his room felt like a cellar lined with mirrors. Candles leaned toward some unseen current. Water jugs froze overnight and herbs turned brittle at his touch. Yet his hands were warm and his eyes burned with a restless light. One night, Jacob brought a wrapped fragment of stone, carved with shifting spirals. He had pried it from the burial site, swearing it was older than the town. The sleeper held it, then murmured, "A pact in the deep is never truly yours." The next morning, frost spirals appeared around town. They were in doorways and cupboards and mirrors. People began calling him the Returned. But none asked aloud, if the earth had given him something, what had it taken in return? And there we have it, a complete and atmospheric story. The moral of the story: sometimes the things we wish for most come at a price we are not willing to pay. The winter thickened, yet the Returned moved untouched by the cold. On the seventh night, he summoned Jacob and the innkeeper. He led them out into the white silence of the village square, where the snow-laden branches of the gallows tree scraped against the frozen rooftops. There was no moon, but the air was filled with a strange light, as if the snow itself was glowing, and at its center stood the mound. He spoke then in a voice that felt older than his own. "There is no gift without a tether," he said. 3 days below is not endurance, it is an exchange. The earth remembers the bargain, and Jacob knew then that the earth was not merely a place of burial, it was something more, something sentient, something that had taken his friend and would take him too, unless he could bring himself to defy it. He looked at the innkeeper, whose face was pale in the unnatural light, her eyes wide with dawning understanding. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. His gaze returned to the mound. There was a whisper now, a sibilant murmur rising from the frozen ground, slithering up the gnarled roots of the gallows tree, coiling around the lone lantern that cast grotesque shadows on the snow. Shadows that writhed and twisted as though animated by some unseen presence. "What does it want?" the innkeeper whispered, her voice hoarse. He closed his eyes, listening to the whisper. When he opened them again, there was a wild light in their depths. "It wants me," he said. And so on the 10th night, after tending the fire and laying his affairs to rest, he went out into the night to meet the whisper headman. He walked unafraid, as if drawn by some dark, irresistible current. It was as if the very air urged him forward, urging him to the edge of the frozen lake. And there, in the heart of the silent village, under the watchful gaze of the gnarled gallows tree, he knelt beside the mound. The whisper rose to a crescendo, a chilling harmony of voices that echoed across the frozen lake, weaving tales of ages past and bargains struck between mortals and the earth. Tales that chilled him to the bone, yet stirred something ancient within his soul. Then from the mound a hand emerged, skeletal fingers wrapped in a shroud as white as snow. It beckoned to him, pulling him down into a darkness that smelled of loam and decay. A darkness that embraced him like a lover and enveloped him in its icy depths. But before he yielded to the pull, he turned to the innkeeper, who stood at the edge of the light, her face a mask of sorrow and understanding. "Do not wait for me," he whispered, his voice echoing strangely in his own ears. "The earth has need of me. I must go." And with that, he allowed himself to be pulled into the mound, into the darkness that welcomed him like a long-lost son. In the days that followed, strange things happened in the village. A wagon wheel, identical to the one buried with the stranger, snapped as it passed over the mound, sending shivers down the spines of the villagers. Frost spiraled on the splinters of the gallows tree, tracing patterns of an ancient language. A kite, flown by a child, was found stiff with ice, as if frozen mid-flight. And every morning before dawn, faint knocks echoed from beneath the cobblestones, as if someone were tapping from just below the surface. Then one night, the dream came to many. A shared vision of the burial bell tolling 3 slow times, each toll resonating in the marrow of their bones. It was a summons, they knew, though not to what or whom, they couldn't say. But the bell had always been silent, or so they thought. In the aftermath, whispers replaced footsteps in the village square. Fearful glances were exchanged. Some spoke of a curse, others of vengeance. But young Tobias, the innkeeper's son, puzzled over the riddle of the bell. For days he pondered the tolling, the meaning behind the solemn knell. Then one day, staring into the depths of the frozen lake, he realized the bell had never been for them, not for the villagers or the innkeeper. It had been for the others, for those who had come before, who had sought solace in the earth's embrace. And now they were calling him back, calling him to join them in the silent symphony of the dead. The first time they came for him, he let them take him. A small price to pay for salvation. But on the night they came for him again, the air was still. The moon, thin as a blade, cut only the edges of shadow. He was waiting when Jacob arrived, holding the stone fragment. "They've called," he said. And though the summons had come for him, there was a question in his voice that mirrored Jacob's own confusion. They went to the courtyard. Frost bloomed in spiral trails underfoot. The earth loosened without a spade, and in the center of it all, a grave had been dug, not by hand, by teeth. It gaped open, a dark maw in the pale moonlight. The man hesitated, clutching the stone, and for a moment Jacob thought he might refuse, might turn and flee back to the safety of the village, back to the life he'd so carefully built since they de-saved him from the earth 10 years ago. But he didn't. And as he watched, the man stepped into the grave. The earth closed over him, leaving only the fragment of stone showing, a single jagged edge just above the surface. The man disappeared from view, swallowed by the cold, dark earth. Then from the grave, a whisper. It was never about surviving, it was about remembering where I belong. The ground rose to meet him, folding around him like a tide reclaiming the shore. For an instant, Jacob thought he saw shapes in the mist, figures without edges. Watching, then the courtyard was empty, save for the stone fragment lying on bare earth. He looked at it, cold and hard in his palm, smooth, except for the rough edges where it had broken off, a piece of a whole that had once pulsed with warmth and light. Now only the fragments remained, scattered and lost. He wanted to scream, to smash the stone, to do something, anything to bring back the man whose name he'd forgotten, whose face was a blur at the edges of his memory. But he stood there in the gathering darkness, and all he could do was remember the stories the old woman used to tell, the tales of giants and spirits in a world older than the one they decarved out of the wilderness. She'd called this place the Whisper, where the veil between worlds was thinnest and the earth most restless. And now he understood why the man had come back, why he'd willingly walked into the hungry earth. This wasn't a place for the living, not anymore. This was a place for the earth to reclaim, to fold into itself and keep safe from the gnawing hunger of the world. He didn't know where the man had gone to, but he knew he'd found peace where he'd come from. He knew because sometimes on still nights, 3 faint chimes still echo from beneath the cobblestones, a melody without beginning or end, and the whisper remains. The story the earth keeps hidden, a man who went below twice, once to endure, once to return. So Jacob kept his vigil, tending the flame of memory until the first tendrils of dawn crept over the horizon. When the sun rose, chasing the shadows away, he buried the stone fragment, too, tucking it into the soft earth like a seed. Then he went back to the village, back to the life the man had saved, back to the story he would carry until his own time came to walk beneath the stones and become one with the whisper. Some say the earth doesn't remember what we bury, but here, beneath these stones, memories bloom in the dark, taking root in the hush of the grave. They wait, patient and deep, until the moon is thin as a blade, and the wind whispers tales to those who will listen. Do you think it was chance or something far older? I'm the keeper of the whisper, and if you wish to hear more tales the earth keeps hidden, subscribe and keep your ear to the ground. Until next time, may the bones of the earth cradle you, and the blood of the soil keep you strong.